My son sent me a text on the eve of his wedding that shattered my heart and then sealed his fate. Dad, do not come tomorrow. Monica says your blue-collar vibe will embarrass her family. I did not reply. I did not call. I simply opened my laptop and clicked one button that turned their dream wedding into a nightmare. If you have ever been underestimated by the very people you sacrificed everything for, hit that like button and subscribe. Let me know in the comments if you would have done what I did. I was sitting at my kitchen table with a tin of shoe polish and an old rag. The smell of wax and leather filled the room, mixing with the faint scent of sawdust that never really leaves a man like me. It was a Friday night in my small house in the suburbs of Chicago. The house is paid off. It is quiet. It is empty since my wife Catherine passed away 5 years ago. On the back of the kitchen door hung my charcoal suit. It was 10 years old, but I had it dry cleaned just for tomorrow. My son Jason was getting married. I am 66 years old, and my name is Bernie Kowalski. I rubbed the cloth in small circles over the toe of my dress shoe. I wanted to look presentable. I am a retired contractor. I spent 40 years of my life with cracked hands and a sore back pouring concrete and framing houses so that my son would never have to. I wanted him to have the soft hands of a man who signs checks, not the rough hands of a man who cashes them. And I succeeded. Jason is 28. He wears suits that cost more than my first car. He drives a BMW that I pay for, though he tells his friends he bought it with his bonus. I looked at the clock on the wall. It was 7 in the evening. I was expecting a call, maybe a little excitement, maybe a thank you. I had transferred $85,000 to the wedding venue, the Grand Plaza, just 48 hours ago. It was the deposit and the final payment all in one. Monica, my future daughter-in-law, had insisted on the Grand Plaza. She said it was the only place that met her standards. My phone buzzed on the table. The vibration rattled against the oak wood. I wiped my hands on a paper towel and picked it up. A smile touched my face. It was a text from Jason. I put on my reading glasses. I read the message. Then I read it again. Then I took my glasses off and cleaned them and put them back on and read it a third time. Dad, I am so sorry, but Monica is really stressed. She says having you there will make her anxious. Her family is very high society from New York, and well, you know, you are a bit too working class. They are uncomfortable around people who look like they labor. It is better if you do not come. I will send you photos. Love, Jason. I stared at the phone until the screen went black. The silence in the kitchen was sudden and absolute. It felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. Too working class. The words echoed in my head. I looked at my hands. They are calloused. I have a scar on my left thumb from a table saw accident in '98. I have a permanent tan on my neck from working under the summer sun. These hands built the foundation of the house Jason grew up in. These hands changed his diapers when Catherine was sick. These hands signed the checks for his private school and his college tuition. And these hands signed the check for $85,000 yesterday. I did not feel anger at first. I felt a cold, heavy stone settle in my stomach. It was the feeling of a man who realizes he has been building a house on a sinkhole for 28 years. Jason did not even have the courage to call me. He sent a text. He dismissed his father, the man who had been his only parent for the last 5 years, with a text message. Monica. I thought of her. She is 26. She acts like a princess. She told Jason she comes from old money. She speaks with a fake accent she picked up from watching television. She treats waiters like servants. And Jason just follows her like a puppy. He is weak. I raised him to be kind, but somewhere along the way, kindness turned into weakness. I stood up. My knees popped. I walked to the refrigerator and took out a bottle of beer, but then I put it back. This moment required something stronger. I went to the cabinet and poured 3 fingers of whiskey into a glass. I drank it in one swallow. The burn woke me up. I looked at the suit hanging on the door. It looked like a costume now. A costume for a clown who thought he was part of the family. I walked over to it. I took the hanger off the hook. I walked to the hall closet and hung it in the very back behind my winter coats. I would not be needing a suit tomorrow. I walked back to the kitchen table. I picked up my phone. I hovered my thumb over the call button. I wanted to scream. I wanted to ask him how he could do this, but then I stopped. What was the point? If I had to beg my son to want me at his wedding, then I had already lost. Dignity is the only thing a man has when he is alone. I would not give them the satisfaction of hearing me cry. I would not give them the satisfaction of hearing me yell. I sat down at my desk in the corner of the living room. I opened my laptop. The screen glowed blue in the dim light. I logged into my bank account. Most people look at me and see an old man in a flannel shirt driving a Ford F-150 with rust on the bumper. They see a man who cuts his own grass. They see a man who clips coupons for coffee. They do not know who I am. They do not know that 30 years ago I started a construction supply company. They do not know that I bought land when it was cheap and sold it when it was gold. They do not know that I own 3 apartment complexes in the city and a commercial warehouse district. I retired 5 years ago, but my money did not. Jason thinks I live on a pension and Social Security. He thinks the credit card I gave him has a $5,000 limit and that I struggle to pay it. He thinks the $85,000 for the wedding was my entire life savings. He thinks he is draining me dry and that I am too stupid to notice because I love him. He is wrong. I clicked on the transaction history. I wanted to see exactly what my working class money had bought them this week. The list was long. It was disgusting. $4,000 at Serenity Spa. That was 2 days ago. Monica and her mother must have gotten the platinum package. I have not spent $4,000 on myself in the last 4 years. $12,000 to Delta Airlines. First-class tickets from New York. For Monica's parents. Jason told me they were wealthy. If they are so wealthy, why am I paying for their flights? Why am I paying for them to come and look down on me? $3,000 at the Velvet Room. That was last night. The rehearsal dinner. I was not invited to the rehearsal dinner either. Jason told me it was just for the bridal party. But looking at the bill, I see charges for 20 people. 20 people eating steak and lobster on my dime while I ate a ham sandwich in my kitchen. I scrolled down. $500 for a limousine service. Pickup scheduled for tomorrow morning at the airport. That must be for the wealthy parents who cannot afford their own ride. And then the big one. Pending. $85,000. The Grand Plaza. I stared at that number. That was a college education. That was a house in some parts of the country. That was the blood and sweat of my life. And they were using it to throw a party where I was not welcome. I looked at the date. I initiated the transfer yesterday morning. It was an ACH transfer. Most people think these are instant. They are not. They take time to clear. There is a window, a small window, where the sender can revoke the authorization if there is an error or fraud. And this was fraud. It was a fraud of the heart. I moved the mouse cursor. My hand was steady. I was a sniper taking aim. I clicked on the $85,000 transaction. A menu popped up. I selected Dispute Transaction. The bank website asked for a reason. I typed in one word, unauthorized. It was not a lie. I authorized payment for my son's wedding. I did not authorize payment for a social event where I was banned. The contract between a father and son had been breached. I clicked Submit. The screen refreshed. Transaction canceled. The money would not leave my account. The Grand Plaza would get a notification in the morning that the funds had failed. I was not done. I went to the credit card tab. This was the card Jason carried in his wallet. The card he used to impress Monica. The card he used to buy her love. I looked at the balance. He had racked up $20,000 in the last month alone. Flowers, suits, jewelry. I clicked on Manage Authorized Users. I saw his name, Jason Kowalski. There was a toggle switch next to his name that said Active. I clicked it. The status changed to inactive, but I wanted to be sure. I wanted to be absolutely sure that when he tried to swipe that card tomorrow to pay for the flowers, or the makeup artist, or the final bar tab, that it would be a brick of useless plastic. I clicked Report Lost or Stolen. The site asked if I wanted to order a replacement card. I clicked No. I leaned back in my chair. The room was silent, but inside my head I could hear the sound of a guillotine dropping. I closed the browser tab for the bank. Then I opened my email. I had an email from the landlord of the house on Oak Street. This is the house Jason and Monica live in. They think they rent it from a property management company. They do not know that I own the house. I bought it through an LLC 3 years ago, so they would have a nice place to live. I have been subsidizing their rent. They pay $1,000 a month. The market rate is $3,000. I pay the difference from one pocket to the other to keep the books balanced. I wrote an email to the property manager. His name is Sullivan. He is also my lawyer and my old friend. Subject: Eviction Notice. Sullivan. Prepare a 30-day notice for the tenants on Oak Street. Also, I am raising the rent to market value effective immediately for any lease renewal. No exceptions. Send it tomorrow morning. Bernie. I clicked send. It was done. In the span of 10 minutes, I had dismantled the financial fantasy my son lived in. I closed the laptop. I felt a strange sensation. I thought I would feel guilty. A father should protect his child, but a father should also teach his child. And I had failed to teach Jason gratitude. I had failed to teach him respect. So now life would have to teach him, and life is a cruel teacher. I walked back to the kitchen. I washed my whiskey glass and put it in the drying rack. I put the shoe polish away under the sink. My phone started to buzz again. I walked over to it. It was Jason calling. He must have been at a bar or a club, maybe celebrating his last night of freedom. Or maybe his card had just been declined for a round of drinks. The screen lit up with his face. A picture of us from a fishing trip 5 years ago. He was smiling. I was smiling. We looked like a team. I watched the phone vibrate against the table. Buzz, buzz, buzz. It stopped. Then a text came in. Dad, call me back. My card is not working. I stared at the text. He did not ask if I was okay. He did not apologize for the earlier text banning me from the wedding. He only contacted me because his access to my money was cut off. That was all I needed to see. I held the power button on the side of the phone. I held it down until the screen went black and the little spinning wheel disappeared. I turned off the kitchen light. I walked down the hallway to my bedroom. I passed the photos on the wall. Photos of Catherine. Photos of Jason graduating. Photos of the life I thought I had. I lay down on my bed. The sheets were cool. I pulled the blanket up to my chin. Tomorrow was going to be a very bad day for Jason Kowalski. Tomorrow, he was going to wake up and put on a tuxedo that he probably hadn't fully paid for yet. He was going to go to a venue that was expecting an $85,000 check that was never coming. He was going to stand in front of his high society in-laws with a frozen credit card and a lie that was about to explode in his face. And I would not be there to fix it. I closed my eyes. For the first time in 28 years, I did not worry about my son. I did not worry about his future. I had done everything I could. I drifted off to sleep, listening to the sound of the wind outside. It sounded like a storm was coming. And it was. But for the first time, the storm was not hitting my house. It was hitting his. The sun was just beginning to burn off the morning mist that clung to the manicured lawns of my neighborhood. It was 7 in the morning on the day my son was supposed to get married. Most fathers would be tying a Windsor knot, or checking their watch, or maybe nursing a coffee while thinking about the speech they were going to give. I was out in my front yard pulling the starter cord on my 20-year-old Toro lawnmower. The engine sputtered and then roared to life, a loud mechanical growl that shattered the suburban silence. I loved that sound. It was the sound of work. It was the sound of reliability. That machine had never let me down, unlike the people who were about to show up. I adjusted my hat, pulling the brim low over my eyes, and started pushing the mower across the grass. I could smell the gasoline and the sweet, sharp scent of cut clover. It was grounding. It reminded me of who I was. I was Bernie Kowalski. I built things. I fixed things. And today I was going to tear something down. I was halfway through the second row when I heard the screech. It was the distinct sound of high-performance rubber being tortured against asphalt. I didn't look up immediately. I kept my pace steady, pushing the mower, feeling the vibration in my hands. But I knew that sound. I knew the engine note that followed it. It was a BMW M5, a machine of precision engineering that cost north of $100,000. I knew exactly how much it cost, because I was the one who wrote the check for it 2 years ago when Jason said he needed a reliable car for client meetings. The black sedan drifted around the corner way too fast for a residential street and slammed on the brakes right in front of my driveway. The tires smoked, leaving thick black skid marks on the pavement I had sealed myself last summer. I stopped the mower. I didn't turn it off. I just let it idle, the engine chugging rhythmically while I leaned against the handle and waited. The driver's door flew open. Jason scrambled out. He looked like a wreck. His hair was unwashed, sticking up in tufts, and he was wearing a wrinkled t-shirt and sweatpants. He looked nothing like a man about to marry into high society. He looked like a boy who had lost his mother at the grocery store. Then the passenger door opened. Monica stepped out. She was wearing a pink velour tracksuit that probably cost more than my lawnmower and huge sunglasses that covered half her face. She slammed the door so hard, the car rocked on its suspension. That made my jaw tighten. "You don't slam the door of a car you don't own." "Bernie," she screamed. Her voice was shrill, cutting through the rumble of the lawnmower. "What the hell is wrong with you?" I reached down and flipped the switch on the mower. The engine died. The sudden silence was heavy. I took a slow breath, inhaling the gasoline fumes one last time before facing them. I grabbed a rag from my back pocket and wiped the sweat from my forehead. I didn't say a word. I just looked at them. Jason ran up the driveway, his loafers slipping on the loose grass clippings. "Dad," he panted, stopping a few feet away from me. "Dad, you have to pick up the phone." "Why is your phone off? Do you have any idea what is happening?" I looked at him calmly. "I am cutting the grass, Jason. I like to focus when I work." Monica marched up behind him. She didn't look at me. She looked at her phone, typing furiously with manicured nails before shoving the screen toward my face. "Declined," she hissed. "Declined. Do you know what that word means, Bernie?" I was at the salon. I was in the chair. They had just finished the extensions. My hair was wet. And when I gave them the card, the machine beeped. It beeped loud. Everyone looked. The stylist, the other customers, everyone. She took a step closer, invading my personal space. She smelled of expensive chemicals and desperation. It said, "Stolen." She whispered the word like it was a curse. The machine said the card was reported stolen. They thought I was a thief. They threatened to call the police, Bernie. I had to call my father to pay over the phone. My father. On my wedding day. I folded the rag and put it back in my pocket. That sounds embarrassing, I said. My voice was flat, devoid of sympathy. Embarrassing, she shrieked. It was humiliating. You need to call the bank right now. Tell them it was a mistake. Tell them you are an idiot who pressed the wrong button. Fix this. Jason stepped between us, putting his hands up in a placating gesture. Dad, please. We don't have time for this. The florist is waiting for the final payment. The limousine company needs the deposit for the pickup. We have so many vendors to pay this morning. Just unlock the card. We can talk about whatever is bothering you later after the wedding. Whatever is bothering me. The phrase hung in the air. He thought this was a mood. He thought this was a senior moment. He didn't even realize the ground had shifted beneath his feet. I looked at my son. I looked at the panic in his eyes. It wasn't the panic of a man worried about his father. It was the panic of an addict cut off from his supply. I am not calling the bank, I said. Jason blinked. What? I said I am not calling the bank. The card wasn't declined by mistake, Jason. I reported it stolen. Monica let out a sound that was half laugh, half growl. You what? Why would you do that? Because I realized something last night, I said, crossing my arms over my chest. I realized that only a thief would take $85,000 from a man and then tell him he isn't good enough to eat at the same table. Jason's face went pale. He finally understood. This wasn't a glitch. This was a response. Dad, come on, he stammered, his voice dropping to a whisper. You got the text. Look, I am sorry, okay? It is complicated. Monica's family is different. They have expectations. We just wanted the day to be perfect. We didn't want you to feel out of place. Out of place, I repeated. You are standing in the driveway of the house I built. You are driving the car I bought. You are wearing clothes I paid for. And you think I am the one who is out of place. Monica scoffed, rolling her eyes behind her dark glasses. Oh, here we go. The martyr act. Listen, Bernie, we don't have time for your little blue-collar pity party. We have guests arriving from the Hamptons. We have a schedule. You are ruining everything because your fragile ego got bruised. Just give us the money and go back to your gardening. You are right. You don't fit in with my family. Look at you. You are covered in grass. You look like the help. The help. I looked down at my boots. They were old work boots stained with oil and mud. I looked at my flannel shirt. It was faded at the elbows. Then I looked past them at the BMW sitting in the street. That car was my pride and joy when I bought it. I had worked an extra 6 months of consulting jobs just to pay cash for it, so Jason wouldn't have a car payment hanging over his head. I put the title in my name for insurance purposes, but I let him drive it as if it were his own. I let him pretend he was the big shot. You know, Monica, I said, my voice dropping an octave. You are right. I am just the help. I am the help that pays for your apartment. I am the help that pays for your vacations. And I am the help that pays for that car you just slammed the door of. I walked past them down the driveway toward the street. Where are you going? Jason asked, his voice rising in pitch. Dad, where are you going? I walked up to the BMW. I ran my hand along the hood. The metal was hot from the engine. I looked at the tires. Michelin pilots. $500 a corner. I paid for those too. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my key ring. I had a spare key for every vehicle I owned. I pressed the unlock button. The lights flashed. I opened the driver's door. Dad, what are you doing? Jason yelled, running toward me. We need that car. We have to pick up the groomsmen in an hour. I sat in the driver's seat. The leather was soft. It smelled like Jason's cologne and Monica's perfume. It smelled like entitlement. I started the engine. The dashboard lit up. "Get out of the car!" Bernie Monica screamed, running down the driveway, her heels clicking frantically on the concrete. "That is our car. You can't take our car." I rolled down the window as they reached me. I looked at Jason. He was gripping the door handle, his knuckles white. "It is not your car, Jason," I said. "It never was. It is my car. My name is on the title. My name is on the insurance. And since I am not invited to the wedding, I don't see why my car should be invited either." "Dad, you can't do this," Jason pleaded, tears welling up in his eyes. "How are we supposed to get to the venue? How are we supposed to get around?" "I don't know," I said, shifting the car into gear. "Maybe you can call Monica's wealthy father. I am sure he has a spare limousine lying around. Or maybe you can take the bus. It is very affordable, very blue-collar." I didn't wait for a response. I stepped on the gas. The car surged forward, leaving them standing in the street. I looked in the rearview mirror. I saw Jason standing there with his arms hanging by his sides, looking lost. I saw Monica throwing her hands in the air, screaming at the empty space where the car used to be. I drove the BMW around the block and parked it in my garage. I closed the garage door. Then I went back inside my house and locked the front door. I went to the kitchen and poured myself a cup of coffee. My hands were shaking slightly, not from fear, but from adrenaline. I had fired the first shot, but the war was far from over. I sat down at the table and looked at my phone. It was buzzing again. This time it wasn't Jason. It was the landline. I let it ring. I knew what was coming next. They would try to go back to their apartment. They would try to regroup. They would try to find anything they could sell to get quick cash. They were heading to the house on Oak Street, and they had no idea that the locks on that house were being changed in exactly 20 minutes. I took a sip of coffee. It was bitter. Just the way I like it. This was going to be a very long day, but for the first time in a long time I was looking forward to it. They wanted a show. They wanted a perfect high society wedding. Well, I was going to give them a show they would never forget. I was going to show them exactly what happens when the help decides to quit. The phone stopped ringing. The silence returned, but it wasn't peaceful. It was the silence of a fuse burning down, and the explosion was going to be spectacular. I stood up and walked to the window. I watched them walking down the street away from my house. They were arguing. Monica was shoving Jason. Jason was trying to grab her arm. They looked small from here, small and petty and weak. They were walking toward the bus stop. I almost felt sorry for them. Almost. But then I remembered the text message. "Don't come. You are too working class." I turned away from the window. I had work to do. I had a wedding to crash, and I needed to make sure my suit was pressed. Because if I was going to be the villain in their story, Tut was going to be the best-dressed villain they had ever seen. I walked to the closet and pulled out the charcoal suit. I laid it on the bed. I ran my hand over the fabric. It was good quality, durable, just like me. The game had changed, and they didn't even know the rules yet. I stood in my kitchen listening to the silence of the house, but it did not last long. The pounding started on the front door less than 10 minutes after I had taken the BMW back. It was a rhythmic, desperate thudding that shook the frame. They had not walked to the bus stop after all. They had come back. They had realized that without me, they were stranded in a suburb with no money, no car, and a clock that was ticking down to a social disaster. I finished my coffee. I placed the mug in the sink. I walked slowly to the door. I did not hurry. I was done hurrying for people who would not cross the street to help me. I unlocked the deadbolt and pulled the door open. Jason was standing there, his chest heaving, his face slick with sweat. Monica was behind him, her arms crossed her expensive tracksuit looking ridiculous against the peeling paint of my porch railing. She looked like an angry flamingo in a coal mine. "You have to stop this, Dad," Jason said, his voice cracking. "You are taking this too far. It was just a text. It was just a request. We didn't mean to hurt your feelings, but you are acting like a lunatic. Give us the keys. Turn the cards back on. We have an hour before the ceremony starts." I leaned against the doorframe, blocking the entrance. I looked at my son. He was 28 years old, but in that moment he looked like a toddler throwing a tantrum in a toy store. "I am not acting like a lunatic, Jason," I said, my voice calm and low. "I am acting like a man who just saved $85,000. Monica stepped forward, pushing Jason aside. Her face was twisted into a sneer that exposed the lines of filler around her mouth. "Listen to me, you selfish old man," she spat. "You think this is a game. You think you can hold us hostage. You are pathetic. This is my wedding, my day, and you are ruining it because you are too sensitive to handle the truth." "And what is the truth, Monica?" I asked. "The truth is that you are an embarrassment," she screamed. "Look at you. Look at this house. It smells like old grease and sawdust. You wear clothes from a thrift store. You drive a truck that belongs in a junkyard. My parents are sophisticated people. They are flying in from New York. They run in circles you couldn't even dream of getting into. Do you really think I want them to see you standing next to us in photos? Do you think I want to explain to my friends that my father-in-law digs ditches for a living?" I stood there and let her words hit me. They were meant to hurt. They were meant to cut me down. But they didn't hurt. They just clarified things. They stripped away the last layer of doubt. "I don't dig ditches, Monica," I said. "I own the company that digs the ditches, and the company that pours the concrete, and the company that builds the walls. But you never cared about that, did you? You only cared about the checkbook." "I don't care what you own," she hissed. "You are low-class, Bernie. You always have been. You are cheap. You are tacky. And frankly, we were doing you a favor by inviting you at all. But now you are going to fix this. You are going to give us the money because you owe it to Jason. You owe him a future." "I owe him nothing," I said. "I gave him a life. I gave him an education. I gave him a home. And in return, he gave me a text message telling me to stay away." Jason tried to intervene. "Mom didn't mean that, Dad. She is just stressed." "Oh, shut up," Jason, Monica snapped at him. "Stop coddling him. He needs to hear this." She turned back to me, her eyes blazing. "You are going to pay for this wedding, Bernie. You are going to pay for every single cent, because if you don't, I will make sure you never see your son again. I will make sure you die alone in this miserable little house." I looked at her. I looked at the greed and the entitlement radiating off her like heat from a pavement. And then I asked the question that had been burning in my mind since last night. Why, I asked. What, she snapped. Why should I pay for a party I am not invited to? She blinked. The question seemed to confuse her. "Because it is your duty," she said. "Because that is what parents do, they pay." "No," I said. "Parents provide. Fools pay. And I am done being a fool." I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. It was an old model with a cracked screen. Monica looked at it with disdain. "What are you doing?" she asked. "I am making a call," I said. I unlocked the phone. I scrolled through my contacts. I didn't have many, but the ones I had were useful. I found the number for Prestige Limousines. I knew the owner. His name was Tony. We had played poker together for 20 years. I put the phone on speaker and held it up. Monica's eyes widened. She recognized the name. The phone rang once, twice. Bernie Tony's voice boomed through the tiny speaker. "Good to hear from you. Everything good for the pickup?" "Hello, Tony," I said, keeping my eyes locked on Monica's face. I am calling about the reservation for the Kowalski wedding. The stretch Hummer and the 2 town cars for the airport pickup. Yes, sir, Tony said. My drivers are at O'Hare right now. The flight from New York just landed. We are waiting for the party at baggage claim. I saw the color drain from Monica's face. Her parents, her wealthy, sophisticated parents, were walking toward baggage claim right now, expecting a chauffeur with a sign. Tony, I said, there has been a change of plans. What kind of change, Bernie? Tony asked. I need you to cancel the service, I said. Cancel it? Tony sounded confused. Bernie, the drivers are already there. The meter is running. I know, Tony, I said. I will pay the cancellation fee. Whatever it is, just put it on my tab. But do not pick up those passengers. Bernie, are you sure? Tony asked. It is a wedding day. I am sure, Tony, I said. The credit card on file for the incidentals was my son's, and it has been reported stolen. And I am withdrawing my personal guarantee for the contract. Send the drivers home. There was a pause on the line. Then Tony sighed. All right, Bernie. You are the boss. I will radio them now to leave the terminal. Sorry about the trouble. No trouble, Tony, thanks. I hung up the phone. The silence that followed was different. It wasn't the silence of a fuse burning. It was the silence of a bomb that had just gone off. Monica let out a sound that was not human. It was a guttural screech of pure panic. You didn't, she whispered, her hands flying to her mouth. You didn't just strand my parents at O'Hare. I put the phone back in my pocket. I did, I said. They are wealthy people, Monica. I am sure they can figure out how to use Uber. Or maybe they can take the Blue Line train. It goes straight to downtown. It is very efficient, very working class. My parents do not take public transportation, she screamed, lunging at me. Jason caught her around the waist, holding her back. She clawed at the air, reaching for my face. You monster. You ruined everything. They are going to be standing on the curb like hobos. They will hate me. They will hate you. They don't even know me, I said. And judging by how you talk about me, they probably already hate me. So I have lost nothing. Jason looked at me with eyes full of betrayal. Dad, how could you? They are guests. This is humiliating. Humiliating, I repeated. Humiliating is sitting in your kitchen polishing your shoes for a wedding you were told not to attend. Humiliating is realizing your son is ashamed of the hands that fed him. This isn't humiliation, Jason. This is education. Education, he shouted. You are destroying my life to teach me a lesson. I am destroying the lie you are living, I said. You wanted to play the big shot, Jason. You wanted to marry the princess. Well, big shots pay their own bills, and princesses don't marry paupers. Monica stopped struggling against Jason's grip. She stood up straight, smoothing her tracksuit. Her face was cold now. Calculated. Fine, she said. Fine. You want to play dirty, Bernie? We can play dirty. You think you can starve us out? You think we will come crawling back? You are wrong. We don't need you. We have the house on Oak Street. We have our wedding gifts. We will figure this out. And when we do, you will never see us again. You will never see your grandchildren. You will die alone in this rotting house and no one will care. I smiled. It was a sad smile, but it was genuine. The house on Oak Street, I said. Yes, the house, she snapped. Our house. I looked at my watch. It was 8:15. You might want to head over there, I said. Why, she asked suspiciously. Because at 8 o'clock this morning, a locksmith met the property manager there, I said. They are changing the locks, and since the lease was technically month to month and under my name, I terminated it. Jason dropped his hands from her waist. He looked like he had been shot. You evicted us, he whispered. I didn't evict you, I said. I just stopped providing housing for people who are not family. You said it yourself, Monica. I am just a bank account, and the bank is closed. Monica stared at me. Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. The magnitude of what was happening was finally crashing down on her. No car, no venue, no limo for her parents, and now no home. Jason backed away from me. He looked at the house he had grown up in. He looked at me, his father. And for the first time I saw fear in his eyes. Real fear. The fear of a man who realizes he is standing on a trapdoor and the lever has just been pulled. You are insane, he said. You are actually insane. Go, I said, pointing to the street. Go find your wife's parents. Go explain why they are standing at the airport. Go find a place to sleep tonight. But get off my property. I stepped back inside and closed the door. I locked the deadbolt. I leaned my forehead against the cool wood. My heart was pounding in my chest. It hurt. God, it hurt. To do that to my own boy. To see the hate in his eyes. But then I looked down at my hands. The hands that had built everything. They were trembling. Not from weakness. From rage. From the release of years of being small so he could feel big. I walked to the window and watched them. They were running down the driveway now. Jason was on his phone, probably trying to call an Uber that he couldn't pay for. Monica was screaming at him, hitting his arm. They looked like rats on a sinking ship, turning on each other as the water rose. I watched them until they turned the corner and disappeared. I was alone in my house. It was quiet. But it was a clean quiet. The air felt lighter. I went back to the kitchen. I picked up the shoe polish again. I still had one shoe left to shine. I wasn't going to the wedding. But that didn't mean I couldn't have nice shoes. A man has to be ready. Because I knew this wasn't over. They would go to the Oak Street house. They would find the locks changed. And then they would realize that the paintings on the walls, the paintings my wife Catherine had painted, were gone. And that is when the real war would start. I dipped the rag in the wax. Circular motions, patience, focus. I was just getting started. I drove to the house on Oak Street. It was a 20-minute drive from my place past the strip malls and the new developments that had sprung up over the cornfields I used to play in as a boy. I parked my truck across the street. The house looked good. I had resided it myself 3 years ago, choosing a slate blue vinyl that was expensive but lasted forever. The lawn was green. The windows were clean. It was a perfect starter home. A home most young couples would kill for, and I had given it to them for the price of a studio apartment. I saw them before I even turned the engine off. They were standing on the front porch. Monica was banging on the door, but with the flat of her hand screaming at the wood as if it could hear her. Jason was pacing back and forth on the walkway, his hands in his hair, looking like a man who had just watched his house burn down. They hadn't gone to the airport. They hadn't gone to a hotel. They had come here hoping I was bluffing, hoping that the key in Jason's pocket would still turn the tumbler. It didn't. Sullivan is a good property manager. When he says 8 o'clock, he means 8 o'clock. I stepped out of the truck. I didn't slam the door. I just pushed it shut until it clicked. The sound made Jason look up. When he saw me, his face changed. The fear I had seen earlier was gone, replaced by a raw, ugly fury. He didn't see his father anymore. He saw the enemy. He saw the man standing between him and the life he felt he was owed. He started running toward me. He didn't scream. He didn't shout. He just lowered his head and charged. I had seen that look before in bar fights and disagreements on job sites when the money ran out. It was the look of a man who has lost control and wants to hurt something just to prove he still exists. I stood my ground. I didn't flinch. I reached into the bed of my truck. My hand closed around the cold rubber grip of a pair of long-handled pruning shears. I had thrown them in there yesterday after trimming the hedges at one of my rental properties. They were heavy, solid steel, with blades sharp enough to take a finger off without slowing down. I pulled them out and held them at my side. I didn't raise them like a weapon. I just held them like a tool I knew how to use. Jason crossed the street. He didn't slow down. He was going to hit me. My own son was going to tackle me onto the asphalt. I took one step forward and snapped the blades of the shears together. Clack! The sound was sharp and metallic, cutting through the morning air like a gunshot. Jason skidded to a halt 6 feet away from me. He stared at the shears. Then he looked up at my face. I wasn't smiling. I wasn't angry. I was cold. I looked at him with the eyes of a foreman who catches a worker stealing copper wire. I looked at him with the eyes of a man who has fired people bigger and meaner than him. "Don't," I said. My voice was low, barely a whisper, but he heard it. "Do not take another step, Jason." He stood there, chest heaving, fists clenched at his sides. "You locked us out," he choked out, saliva flying from his lips. "All our stuff is in there. My suit, Monica's dress for the reception, our passports, everything. You can't do this. It is illegal." "It is not illegal," I said calmly. "It is a lockout for non-payment of market value rent and lease violation." Sullivan posted the notice on the door. "Didn't you read it?" "I don't care about the notice," he screamed, stepping forward again. "Open the door, Dad. Open the damn door, or I swear to God I will." He raised a fist. I lifted the shears. I pointed the blades right at his chest. I didn't shake. My arm was steady as a rock. "You will what, Jason?" I asked. "You will hit me. You will beat up the old man. Go ahead. Try it. But remember who taught you how to fight. And remember that I spent 40 years breaking concrete while you were playing video games." He froze. He looked at the blades, then at my eyes. He saw something there he had never seen before. He saw that the safety net was gone. He saw that I wasn't his dad anymore. I was just another man. And in a fight between men, he knew he would lose. The rage drained out of him, leaving him hollow. He took a step back, his hands shaking. "You are crazy," he whispered. "You are actually threatening me." "I am not threatening you," I said, lowering the shears but keeping them ready. "I am protecting myself. There is a difference." Monica came running down the lawn, her heels sinking into the grass I paid to have fertilized. She grabbed Jason's arm, pulling him back. "Jason, stop," she cried, looking at me with genuine terror. "He has lost his mind. Look at him. He has a weapon. Let's go. We have to go. We can call the police later. We have to get to the venue. My parents are probably there by now. We have to salvage this." She was right. The clock was ticking. Every minute they wasted arguing with me was a minute closer to their social funeral. I watched them retreat. They backed away toward the sidewalk like I was a rabid dog. "Listen to me," I called out. My voice carried down the street. "I am giving you 24 hours. They stopped and looked back. 24 hours, I repeated. "Sullivan will be here tomorrow at noon. He will open the door for exactly 60 minutes. You can take your clothes and your personal items. Anything left after that goes to the dump." "But the furniture," Monica wailed. "The TV, the wedding gifts. The furniture is mine," I said. "I bought it. The TV is mine. I bought it. The gifts. Well, you can take the gifts. You are going to need them to return for cash when you realize you have nowhere to sleep." I took a step toward them, and they flinched. "Now get out of here," I said. "Get off my street. Go play pretend with your rich in-laws. Go see how far that gets you." Jason looked at me one last time. There was no love in his eyes. Only hate. Pure, unadulterated hate. And that was fine. I could live with hate. I couldn't live with disrespect. "Come on, Monica," he said, grabbing her hand. "Let's go. We will fix this. We don't need him." They turned and ran down the street toward the main road, probably hoping to flag down a taxi or find a spot with cell service to call a ride they couldn't afford. I watched them go. I stood there in the street, holding the pruning shears, feeling the weight of the steel in my hand. A neighbor, Mrs. Higgins, peered out from behind her curtains across the street. I nodded at her. She let the curtain fall back. I walked up the driveway to the house. I walked up to the front door. I looked at the notice Sullivan had taped there. Notice of lease termination. It looked official. It looked final. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the master key. I didn't need to wait for Sullivan. I owned the place. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The air in the house was stale. It smelled of expensive candles and neglect. There were clothes thrown everywhere, pizza boxes on the coffee table. It looked like a frat house, not a home for a married couple. I walked through the living room. I didn't look at the mess. I looked at the walls. There were empty spaces, rectangular patches of paint that were slightly brighter than the rest of the wall. I stopped. My heart skipped a beat. I walked to the hallway. More empty spaces. I walked to the bedroom. Above the bed where I had hung it myself 3 years ago, there should have been a painting, a landscape of the lake cabin we used to rent. Catherine had painted it the summer before she got sick. It wasn't a masterpiece to the world, but it was a masterpiece to me. It was her soul on canvas. It was gone. I looked around the room frantically. The other painting, the one of the flowers, gone. The sketch of Jason as a boy, gone. I ran to the jewelry box on the dresser. It was open. Empty. Catherine's pearl necklace. The one I gave her for our 30th anniversary. Gone. My blood ran cold. Then it boiled. They hadn't just been living off me. They had been selling me piece by piece. I looked down at the floor. Half hidden under the bed was a piece of paper. I picked it up. It was a receipt. Yellow carbon paper. Downtown pawn and gold. Items 3 oil paintings. Amateur 1 pearl necklace, 1 gold watch. Total cash payout $1,200. I stared at the number. $1,200. They had sold my wife's legacy. They had sold the only things I had left of her for $1,200, probably to upgrade the flowers or get a better DJ. The sadness evaporated. The hesitation evaporated. This wasn't about a wedding anymore. This wasn't about disrespect. This was a crime. I took my phone out. I dialed Sullivan. "Bernie," he answered. I changed the locks. "They are out." "I know, Sullivan," I said. My voice was shaking, but not from fear. "I am in the house. Sullivan, I need you to do something for me, and I need you to do it fast." "What is it, Bernie?" "Draft a criminal complaint," I said. "Theft. Grand larceny." "Bernie, are you sure? It's your son." I looked at the empty spot on the wall where Catherine's painting used to be. I touched the wall. It was cold. "He isn't my son right now, Sullivan," I said. "He is a thief. Prepare the papers and call the police. Tell them to meet me at the Grand Plaza." "You are going to the wedding?" Sullivan asked. "Yes," I said. "I am going to the wedding. I have to deliver a gift." I hung up. I put the receipt in my pocket. I walked out of the house and locked the door. I got into my truck. I had work to do. I pulled my truck up to the curb in front of the house on Oak Street and killed the engine. The silence that followed was heavy. It was the kind of quiet that usually comes before a storm breaks. I sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel, looking at the house. It was a good house, a solid house. I had bought it as a foreclosure 3 years ago and spent 6 months restoring it with my own hands. I sanded the floors. I hung the drywall. I installed the new windows. It was supposed to be a gift, a stepping stone for Jason and Monica to build a life. Now it looked like a fortress that had been barred against me. I stepped out of the truck and walked up the driveway. The concrete was stained with oil leaks that Jason had never bothered to clean up. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my key ring. I selected the brass key that opened the front door, the master key that I had kept for emergencies. I slid it into the lock. It went in halfway and stopped. I jiggled it. I tried to force it. It hit a wall of metal. They had changed the locks. I stood there on the porch staring at the deadbolt. A low chuckle escaped my throat, but there was no humor in it. It was a sound of pure disbelief. They lived in my house rent-free. They drove my cars. They spent my money. And their response to a disagreement was to change the locks on a property they did not own. It was a level of audacity that I almost had to admire. They truly believed that possession was 9/10 of the law. They truly believed that if they kept me out, they could keep their fantasy alive. I took out my phone. I didn't call Jason. I didn't call Monica. There was no point in screaming through a locked door. Instead, I scrolled down to a number I had not used in a while. Mike the locksmith answered on the second ring. "Bernie," he said, "what can I do for you?" "I need you at Oak Street," Mike, I said. "Bring the drill. And bring a new set of deadbolts, the heavy-duty ones." I waited on the porch. I didn't pace. I didn't look through the windows. I just stood there like a sentry. Neighbors drove by, slowing down as they saw me standing guard in my work clothes. I didn't wave. I wasn't in the mood for neighborly pleasantries. I was in the mood for access. Mike arrived in 15 minutes. He was a big man who had been cracking safes and picking locks in this town for 30 years. He took one look at me and then one look at the door, and he didn't ask a single question. He knew who owned the deed. He knew who paid the bills. "Lost your keys, Bernie?" he asked, pulling a heavy drill from his van. "Something like that," I said. "The tenants decided to make some unauthorized modifications. I need to inspect the property." Mike nodded. He stepped up to the door. The sound of the drill biting into the metal was loud and violent. It shrieked as it bored through the pins of the lock Jason had probably paid a fortune to have installed just hours ago. Metal shavings curled onto the welcome mat. It took less than 2 minutes. With a final crunch, the lock gave way. Mike used a screwdriver to turn the mechanism, and the door swung open. "Thanks, Mike," I said, handing him a wad of cash. "Install the new ones and give me the only set of keys." I stepped across the threshold. The smell hit me first. It was a thick, cloying mixture of stale champagne, expensive perfume, and old garbage. It smelled like a party that had gone on for too long and ended badly. The blinds were drawn, casting the living room in a dim, dusty twilight. I reached out and flipped the light switch. The devastation was absolute. It wasn't that the house had been destroyed in a fit of rage. It was that it had been treated with a casual, ongoing disrespect that was somehow worse. There were clothes everywhere. Designer jackets thrown over the backs of chairs, silk dresses pooled on the floor like puddles of oil. Shoeboxes were stacked in towers that leaned precariously against the walls. Takeout containers littered the coffee table, some of them buzzing with flies. I walked further into the room, my boots crunching on something hard. I looked down. It was a crystal flute shattered into pieces. I stepped over it. This was how they lived. This was the reality behind the Instagram photos and the high society pretension. They lived like squatters in a palace. They treated my property the same way they treated me, with total indifference to its value. I walked into the kitchen. The sink was overflowing with dishes. A bottle of Dom Perignon sat on the counter, uncorked and half full, going flat in the heat. I looked at the granite countertops I had installed. There were ring marks and stains. I looked at the cabinets. One of the doors was hanging off its hinges. I felt a cold fury rising in my chest. This wasn't just messy. This was ungrateful. Every stain, every scratch, every piece of trash was a testament to how little they cared about the work I had done for them. But then I noticed something else. Something that made the mess seem insignificant. I walked back into the living room. I looked at the walls. When I had given them the house, I had left a few things. Furniture, mostly, but also art. My wife, Catherine, had been a painter. She wasn't professional, but she had a way of capturing light that made the world feel softer. She had painted landscapes of the places we had visited, the lakes, the mountains, the quiet corners of the world where we had been happy. I looked at the spot above the fireplace. There was a large rectangular patch of paint that was cleaner and brighter than the rest of the wall. The painting of the lighthouse in Maine was gone. I spun around. I looked at the wall by the hallway. The painting of the wildflower field. Gone. My heart began to hammer against my ribs. It wasn't the frantic beat of panic. It was the heavy thud of dread. I ran down the hallway, kicking aside a pile of laundry. I burst into the master bedroom. The bed was unmade, a tangle of expensive sheets. Suitcases were open on the floor, half-packed, as if they had been interrupted. But I didn't care about that. I looked at the wall above the dresser. Catherine's self-portrait. The one she had painted for me on our 25th anniversary. The one where she was smiling that secret smile she only gave to me. It was gone. I stood there in the center of the room, spinning slowly in a circle. The walls were bare. Every single piece of art, every single reminder of my wife was missing. The hooks were still there, naked and accusing. I rushed to the closet. I threw open the doors. I pulled out the drawers of the jewelry cabinet I had built into the wall. It was empty. Catherine's pearl necklace, her diamond earrings, the gold watch I had given her when Jason was born. All of it gone. I felt like I couldn't breathe. The air in the room felt thin. They hadn't just lived off me. They hadn't just disrespected me. They had looted me. They had taken the only pieces of Catherine I had left, the pieces I had trusted them to safeguard, and they had removed them. Why? Why would they take the paintings? They weren't famous. They weren't worth millions on the open market. They were sentimental. They were family history. Unless they needed money fast. Unless they needed cash to pay for the flowers and the limo and the champagne tower at the wedding I wasn't invited to. I fell to my knees. I began to tear through the room. I ripped the sheets off the bed. I dumped the contents of the suitcases onto the floor. I was looking for something, anything, that would tell me where they were. I checked the nightstand drawers, empty except for loose change and receipts. Receipts. I grabbed a handful of papers from the trash can next to the bed. I smoothed them out. Pizza, dry cleaning, a parking ticket. And then I saw it. A yellow slip of carbon paper crumpled into a ball and discarded as if it meant nothing. I unfolded it. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely read the text. The logo at the top was a pair of scales. Downtown Pawn and Loan. I read the itemized list. Item 1, oil painting coastal landscape. Item 2, oil painting floral study. Item 3, oil painting portrait. Item 4, vintage pearl necklace. Item 5, gold lady's watch. I looked at the total payout. $1,200. They had sold my wife's soul. They had sold 40 years of memories. They had sold the legacy of a woman who had loved Jason more than life itself. And they had sold it all for $1,200, probably to pay for the appetizers or the upgrade to the bridal suite. I sat there on the floor, clutching the yellow slip of paper. The rage that had been burning inside me turned into something else. It turned into ice. It turned into a resolve so cold and so hard that it frightened me. This was no longer a dispute between a father and a son. This was no longer about a wedding invitation or a bank account. This was a crime. I stood up. I put the receipt in my pocket. I looked around the room one last time. I looked at the empty walls. I didn't see my son's bedroom anymore. I saw a crime scene. I walked out of the room. I walked down the hallway. I walked past the locksmith who was finishing up the installation of the new deadbolt. "Lock it up, Mike," I said. My voice was steady. "Lock it all up. Nobody gets in here. Not even if they beg." I walked out to my truck. I took out my phone. I dialed a number. Sullivan answered on the first ring. "Bernie, did you get in?" he asked. "I got in," I said. "Sullivan, I need you to do something for me. And I need you to show it right now." "What is it, Bernie?" "I am holding a receipt from a pawn shop," I said. "Jason stole his mother's jewelry. He stole her paintings. And he pawned them." There was a silence on the line. Then Sullivan spoke, his voice grave. "Bernie, that is grand larceny. If we pursue this, he will go to jail." I looked at the house. I looked at the window where Catherine used to stand and wave at me when I came home from work. "Draft the complaint, Sullivan," I said. "Call the precinct. Tell them I want to press charges, and tell them to meet me at the Grand Plaza." "You are going to the venue?" Sullivan asked. "Yes," I said, starting the engine. "I am going to the venue. The police can pick him up there." "Bernie, think about this," Sullivan said. "Doing this at the wedding, that is the nuclear option." I put the truck in gear. "They sold Catherine for $1,200, Sullivan. The nuclear option is the only option left." I hung up. I didn't look back at the house. I drove toward the city. The sun was high in the sky now. It was a beautiful day for a wedding. And it was a beautiful day for justice. I stood in the center of the master bedroom, and the silence of the house felt heavy enough to crush a man. The rectangular pale spots on the walls where Catherine's paintings used to hang looked like fresh scars on skin. They were wounds. They were voids where the soul of this house used to be. I felt a tightness in my chest that had nothing to do with my heart condition and everything to do with heartbreak. I needed to know. I didn't just need to suspect, I needed to know exactly what they had done. I needed to see the paper trail of their betrayal. I walked over to the desk in the corner. It was a cheap particle board thing that Monica had insisted on buying, because it looked modern even though I had offered to build them a solid oak one. The surface was buried under a landslide of paper, unopened envelopes, glossy wedding magazines, brochures for luxury honeymoons in the Maldives. It was a shrine to their delusion. I started digging. I wasn't gentle. I swept the magazines onto the floor with a swipe of my arm. I grabbed handfuls of mail and ripped them open. Past due notice from the electric company. Final warning from the credit card company. A letter from a collection agency regarding a personal loan. It was a financial autopsy. They weren't just broke. They were drowning. They were suffocating under the weight of a lifestyle they couldn't afford, and they were using the wedding as a last gasp of air. They were gambling everything on the hope that the wedding gifts would bail them out, or that I would die and leave them the rest. I pulled open the top drawer. It was jammed with takeout menus and charging cables. I yanked it harder, and it flew off the tracks, crashing onto the floor. Underneath the drawer, hidden in the dark recess of the desk cavity, was a shoebox. I pulled it out. It was an old Nike box. I opened the lid. Inside, there was a tangle of papers, receipts, pawn slips. My hands trembled as I reached in. I picked up the first slip. It was dated 3 months ago. Gold cufflinks. Engraved BK. My cufflinks. The ones I had given Jason for his college graduation. The ones that had belonged to my father. He had pawned them for $200. I picked up another slip. 2 months ago. Silver tea set. Antique. Catherine's tea set. The one her grandmother had brought over from Poland. Gone. Sold for scrap silver. I felt bile rise in my throat. I dug deeper. I was looking for the most recent one. The one that would explain the empty walls and the hollow feeling in the room. I found it at the bottom of the stack. It was dated yesterday. The ink was barely dry. Downtown pawn and loan. The list was long. It was a catalog of my wife's life. Item 1, oil painting. Coastal scene. Artist unknown. Item 2, oil painting. Floral arrangement. Artist unknown. Item 3, 18K gold locket with diamond chip. Item 4, pearl necklace. Double strand. I stared at the paper. The words swam before my eyes. The locket. I had bought that for Catherine when we found out she was pregnant with Jason. I had worked double shifts for 6 months to pay for it. I remembered the night I gave it to her. We were sitting on the floor of our first apartment, eating pizza because we couldn't afford a table yet. She had cried. She had worn it every single day until she got sick. She had taken it off in the hospital because her skin was so sensitive, and she had handed it to me and said, "Give this to Jason's wife one day. Make sure she knows what it means." I had given it to Monica at the engagement dinner. I had told her the story. I had told her it was a symbol of enduring love, and she had sold it. She had taken the symbol of my wife's love for her son, and she had traded it for cash. I looked at the payout amount on the receipt. Total $1,200. That was it. That was the price of my memories. That was the market value of my wife's legacy. They hadn't sold these things because they were starving. They hadn't sold them to buy medicine or pay rent. I looked at the receipt again. It was stapled to another piece of paper. It was an invoice from a florist. Orchid arrangement upgrade for head table $1,200. I let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. They had traded Catherine's locket for flowers. They had traded her paintings for centerpieces that would wilt and die before the night was over. They had erased my wife to buy a few hours of looking rich for people who didn't care about them. I sat down on the edge of the unmade bed. I held the pawn slip in both hands. The paper felt hot against my skin. For years I had made excuses for Jason. I told myself he was young. I told myself he was under pressure. I told myself that he was just trying to find his way in a world that was harder than the one I grew up in. I told myself that deep down he was still the little boy who used to follow me around the job site with a plastic hammer. But that boy was gone. That boy had died a long time ago. The man who lived in this house was a stranger who would steal from his own mother's ghost to impress strangers. I looked up at the empty spot on the wall where Catherine's self-portrait used to be. I could almost see her eyes looking down at me. She had been the soft one. She had always told me to be patient with him. "He is finding his way, Bernie," she would say. "Let him make his mistakes." But this wasn't a mistake. A mistake is forgetting to pay a bill. A mistake is saying the wrong thing in anger. This was a choice. A deliberate, calculated choice to value an image over a person. To value a party over a parent. This was a violation. I felt the last tether snap. The invisible cord that connects a father to his son. That thick rope of unconditional love and duty, it frayed, and then it broke. I wasn't a father anymore. Not in this room. Not with this receipt in my hand. I was a man who had been robbed. I folded the receipt carefully. I creased the edges until they were sharp. I put it in the breast pocket of my flannel shirt right over my heart. It didn't feel like paper anymore. It felt like evidence. I stood up. My knees didn't pop this time. I felt strong. I felt cold. The sadness was gone. The grief was gone. All that was left was a clarity so sharp it cut. I walked over to the dresser and picked up a framed photo of Jason and Monica. They were smiling on a boat somewhere wearing sunglasses, holding drinks. They looked perfect. They looked happy. I took the photo out of the frame. I ripped it in half. Then I ripped the halves. I let the pieces flutter to the floor, joining the mess they had created. I walked out of the bedroom. I walked down the hall past the empty spaces on the walls. I didn't look at them again. I didn't need to. I had the receipt. I walked out the front door and locked the new deadbolt. The click of the lock was the sound of a prison door closing. I walked to my truck. The sun was fully up now, glaring off the hood. It was a beautiful day, a perfect day for a wedding. I climbed into the cab. I reached for my phone. My hand was steady. I scrolled to Sullivan's number. I wasn't calling him to complain. I wasn't calling him to vent. I was calling him to declare war. The time for teaching lessons was over. The time for punishment had begun. I pressed call. Sullivan answered on the first ring. "Bernie, did you get in? I looked at the house one last time. I got in, Sullivan, and I found exactly what I needed." "What did you find, Bernie?" "I found the price tag, Sullivan. I found out exactly how much I am worth to them, and I found out exactly how much Catherine was worth." There was a pause. "Bernie, you sound different." "I am different, Sullivan. The Bernie who paid the bills is gone. The Bernie who looked the other way is gone." "What are you going to do?" "I am going to go to that wedding, Sullivan, but I am not going as a guest, and I am not going as a father." "Then what are you going as?" I started the truck. The engine roared, a deep, angry sound that matched the vibration in my chest. "I am going as the repo man, Sullivan, and I am coming to collect." The phone felt heavy in my hand, like a brick of lead, as I steered the truck onto the main boulevard. The city skyline rose up ahead of me, a jagged line of steel and glass against the blue sky. Somewhere in one of those towers was the law office of Sullivan and Associates. And somewhere else in a ballroom dripping with crystals and silk was my son waiting for a check that had already evaporated into the digital ether. I pressed the call button. The line rang with a hollow electronic purr. Sullivan picked up on the second ring. He sounded breathless, like he had been pacing. "Bernie," he said, "please tell me you didn't do anything rash. Please tell me you just went in, looked around, and left." I merged into the center lane, my eyes fixed on the road. "I didn't do anything rash, Sullivan," I said, my voice steady and cold. "I did something necessary. I have the evidence. I have the receipt. It is in my pocket right now." There was a pause. The sound of papers shuffling on the other end. "What kind of receipt, Bernie?" "A pawn ticket," I said. "Downtown pawn and loan. They stripped the house, Sullivan. They took Catherine's paintings. They took her pearls. They took the watch I gave her when Jason was born. They cleared it out. It wasn't a robbery. It was a liquidation." I heard Sullivan inhale sharply. "Oh God, Bernie, I am so sorry." "Don't be sorry," I snapped. "Be a lawyer. I want you to open a file. Right now. I want you to draft a criminal complaint. Grand larceny. Theft of property over $5,000. I want the paperwork ready to be filed by Monday morning. But that is not all." "Bernie, slow down," Sullivan warned. "This is your son. Once you file criminal charges, there is no going back. The district attorney will pick it up. He could do time." I tightened my grip on the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. "He sold his mother for $1,200, Sullivan. He made his choice. Now I am making mine. Write the complaint." I didn't wait for him to argue. I pushed forward. "And Sullivan, there is one more thing. You have the trust documents in front of you. I do, he said. Go to page 14. Section 3. The Asset Recovery Clause. I heard the sound of pages turning. I knew the document by heart. I had written it myself 5 years ago when I first started to worry that Jason didn't understand the value of $1. It was a fail-safe, a nuclear button I never thought I would have to push. I see it, Sullivan said, his voice dropping to a whisper. Bernie, that clause, that allows you to claw back any assets purchased with trust funds if the beneficiary engages in criminal activity or gross misconduct. Activate it, I said. Bernie Sullivan said. That means everything. The down payments, the furniture, the clothes on his back. If we can prove it was bought with the allowance money, you can legally seize it. I know what it means, I said. Activate it. I want a lien on everything. I want his accounts frozen. I want his assets seized. I want him to wake up tomorrow morning and own nothing but the regret in his heart. I will get the team on it, Sullivan said. His voice was resigned now. He knew better than to argue with me when I used that tone. It was the tone I used when a subcontractor tried to cut corners on a foundation. It was the tone of a man who was about to tear the whole building down. I was about to hang up when my phone beeped. A call waiting tone, sharp and insistent. I pulled the phone away from my ear. The screen flashed. Jason. I looked at the name. It didn't make me smile. It didn't make me hopeful. It just made me tired. Hold on, Sullivan, I said. The defendant is calling. I clicked over. I didn't say hello. I just listened. Dad. Jason's voice was high-pitched, trembling on the edge of hysteria. It was loud and distorted, like he was shouting into the phone while running. Dad, you have to answer me. What did you do? I kept driving. I watched the traffic light turn yellow, then red. I stopped the truck. I am driving, Jason, I said calmly. What do you want? What do I want? He screamed. I am at the Grand Plaza. The manager just came into the bridal suite. He pulled me out of the photos. He has 2 security guards with him. He says the check bounced. He says the wire transfer was recalled. Dad, he is threatening to kick us out. He says if we don't have $85,000 in a cashier's check in 10 minutes, he is canceling the wedding and calling the police for theft of services. I stared at the red light. It was a deep, angry crimson. Is that so? I said. Yes, Jason shrieked. He is serious, Dad. Monica is hyperventilating. Her parents are freaking out because the limo never showed up at the airport, and now they are in a cab stuck in traffic. Dad, you have to fix this. Call the bank. Tell them it was a mistake. Wire the money back. Please. Everyone is here. The guests are arriving. I listened to the background noise. I could hear Monica crying. I could hear the murmur of voices, the sound of a disaster unfolding in real time. It wasn't a mistake, Jason, I said. The line went silent. The background noise seemed to swell. What he whispered. I canceled the check, I said. I called the bank this morning. I told them the transaction was unauthorized. Because it was. I authorized payment for a family wedding. I didn't authorize payment for a show where I was banned from the audience. But the wedding, Jason stammered. The guests. The food. It is all here. Then you better pay for it, I said. With what? He screamed. You cut off my credit cards. You stole my car. You locked me out of my house. I have nothing, Dad. I have literally nothing. I reached into my pocket and touched the pawn slip. The paper was crisp. You have $1,200, I said. What? You have $1,200, Jason. From the pawn shop. Use that. It should cover the appetizers. There was a gasp on the other end of the line. A sound of pure shock. He hadn't thought I knew. He thought he was so smart, so sneaky. Dad, wait, he said, his voice dropping to a terrified whisper. I can explain. It wasn't. We were just going to buy them back later. We needed cash for the tip envelopes. We were going to get them back, I swear. You sold your mother, I said. My voice was no longer calm. It was a growl. You sold her to buy flowers for a woman who hates you. Don't you dare try to explain that to me. Dad, please. Jason was sobbing now, a raw, ugly sound. Please don't do this. They are going to throw us out on the street, in front of everyone. I know, I said. Dad, I am your son. Not today, I said. Today you are just a man who owes a lot of money to people who don't care about your excuses. Dad. Wait. I pulled the phone away from my ear. I looked at the screen one last time. Then I pressed the red button. The call ended. The silence returned to the cab of the truck. The light turned green. I pressed the gas pedal. The truck surged forward toward the Grand Plaza. I wasn't going there to save him. I wasn't going there to pay the bill. I was going there to meet the police officers Sullivan had called. I was going there to hand them a receipt and point a finger. I was going to a wedding. But I wasn't bringing a gift. I was bringing a reckoning. I pulled the Ford F-150 up to the main entrance of the Grand Plaza. The truck was a stark contrast to the line of polished black luxury sedans and rented limousines that idled in the semicircular driveway. My truck had mud on the tires and a dent in the rear bumper from a job site accident 5 years ago. It rumbled with a deep, throaty idle that seemed to offend the very air of this place. The Grand Plaza was a masterpiece of neoclassical architecture. It had towering Corinthian columns, a facade of white limestone that gleamed in the afternoon sun, and massive double doors made of mahogany and glass. It was the kind of place designed to make people feel important just by stepping inside. It was the kind of place that sold the illusion of royalty for a few hours at a time. I parked right in front of the red carpet. I killed the engine. A valet in a burgundy vest rushed over his face, twisted into a mask of professional panic. He waved his hands at me as if he were trying to scare away a stray dog. "Sir, you cannot park here," he said, tapping on my window. "This is a reserved zone for VIP arrivals. Deliveries are around the back. The loading dock is open until 3. I opened the door and stepped out. The valet took a step back, his eyes scanning me from top to bottom. I was wearing the charcoal suit I had pressed the night before. My shoes, the ones I had polished at the kitchen table, shone like obsidian. I had tied my tie with a perfect dimple. I looked like a man who owned the suit, but the truck told a different story. To this kid, I was just a confused contractor who had gotten lost on the way to a funeral. "I am not a delivery driver, son," I said. My voice was calm, but it carried the weight of 40 years of giving orders. "Leave the truck where it is," the kid sputtered. "Sir, I really cannot do that. The general manager is very strict. We have a high-profile wedding starting in 30 minutes. The Kowalski wedding. If Mr. Henderson sees this truck here, he will fire me." I looked at the kid. He was young, scared, just trying to do his job. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a $100 bill. I pressed it into his hand. "If Henderson gives you any trouble, tell him Bernie said it was okay," I said. The kid looked at the money, then at me. He was confused. "Who is Bernie?" he asked. "You will find out," I said. I walked past him toward the massive doors. A security guard stepped into my path. He was a big man, broad-shouldered, wearing a dark suit and an earpiece. He crossed his arms over his chest. He didn't look like the valet. He looked like he enjoyed stopping people. "Excuse me, sir," he rumbled. "Can I see your invitation?" I stopped. I looked him in the eye. "I don't have an invitation," I said. "Then I cannot let you in," he said. "Private event. Guest list only." "I am the father of the groom," I said. The guard smirked. It was a slight movement of his lip, but I saw it. He looked at my truck parked on the red carpet. He looked at my rough hands. "Look, pal," he said, dropping the "sir. "I have been briefed. The groom and the bride were very specific. They said there might be an unwanted guest attempting to gain access. An older man. Disruptive. They said to keep him out at all costs." "Disruptive," I repeated. "Yeah, disruptive. So turn around and get back in your truck before I have to call the police for trespassing." I laughed. It was a dry, harsh sound. Trespassing. That was rich. "I am going to give you one chance to step aside," I said. The guard stepped closer. He towered over me. "Or what, old man? You going to hit me?" "No," I said. "I am going to fire you." He laughed out loud then. A barking sound that echoed off the stone columns. "You are going to fire me. Who do you think you are? You are nobody. You are just some construction guy who got disowned by his own kid. Now beat it." I didn't move. I took a deep breath. I looked past him at the glass doors. I could see movement inside. Staff running back and forth carrying trays of champagne. I could see the chandelier in the lobby, a massive crystal fixture that cost $250,000. I knew how much it cost because I had signed the invoice for it. "Get Henderson," I said. The guard shook his head. "I am not getting anyone. I am giving you 3 seconds to walk away." "Get Henderson," I roared. My voice exploded from my chest, the voice I used to command crews over the roar of jackhammers and cement mixers. It was a voice that didn't ask for permission. It demanded compliance. The guard flinched. He looked at me with a flicker of uncertainty. He touched his earpiece. "Mr. Henderson," he muttered into the microphone, his eyes never leaving mine. "We have a situation at the front entrance." "Yes. It is the guy you warned us about. He is refusing to leave. He is demanding to see you." He listened for a moment, then nodded. "Copy that." He looked at me with a smug grin. "The boss is coming out, and he is bringing the off-duty cops we hired for security. You are about to have a very bad day." I waited. I adjusted my cuffs. I checked the pocket where the pawn slip was resting against my heart. A minute later, the doors swung open. Henderson marched out. He was a tall, thin man with slicked back hair and a suit that cost more than my truck. He looked stressed. He was sweating. He was probably wondering how he was going to explain the missing $85,000 to corporate headquarters. He was flanked by 2 uniformed police officers. The guard stepped aside, gesturing at me like he was presenting a prisoner. "Here he is, Mr. Henderson." He parked that junk heap on the red carpet and threatened my job. "Do you want the officers to remove him?" Henderson stopped. He blinked. He looked at the truck. Then he looked at me. The color drained from his face so fast I thought he was going to faint. His mouth fell open. The angry shout he had prepared died in his throat. He didn't see a crasher. He didn't see a disruptive father. He saw the man who signed his paycheck. He saw the man who had bought this building 5 years ago when it was a failing hotel and turned it into the premier wedding venue in the state. He saw the man who sat at the head of the board meetings once a quarter and grilled him on profit margins and maintenance costs. Mr. Kowalski Henderson stammered. His voice was a squeak. The guard looked at Henderson confused. "Yeah, that is his name. Kowalski. The father. Want me to toss him?" Henderson spun on the guard. "Shut up," he hissed. "Shut up right now." He turned back to me. He smoothed his jacket with trembling hands. He bowed. It wasn't a nod. It was a full bow of subservience. "Chairman Kowalski," he said, his voice shaking. I didn't know you were coming. We weren't expecting you. Is this a surprise inspection?" The guard's jaw dropped. The police officers exchanged a look and took a step back, lowering their hands from their belts. Chairman the guard whispered. I looked at Henderson. I looked at the sweat beading on his upper lip. Hello, Henderson, I said. I see you are having some trouble with the payment for today's event. Henderson flinched. Yes, sir. A terrible misunderstanding. The wire transfer was reversed. We were just about to... Well, we were threatening to cancel the event. The couple is inside. They are frantic. I know, I said. I reversed the transfer. Henderson looked like his brain had just short-circuited. You reversed it, sir. But why? Because I don't pay for services I don't receive, Henderson, I said. And apparently I am not welcome in my own building. Henderson looked at the guard. The guard looked like he wanted to dissolve into the pavement. Sir Henderson said, If I had known, if anyone had told me you were the father, my God. The groom never mentioned. Of course he didn't, I said. He is ashamed of me, Henderson. He thinks I am just a retired contractor. He doesn't know I own the place. He doesn't know I own the holding company that owns the place. He thinks you work for a faceless corporation. I took a step forward. Henderson stepped back, instinctively making way. I am going inside, Henderson, I said. Of course, Sir Henderson said, rushing to open the door for me. Right this way. Do you want me to clear the room? Do you want me to throw them out? No, I said. Let them stay. For now. I have a wedding to attend, and I have a speech to give. I walked past the guard. He was staring at the ground, unable to meet my eyes. I stopped in front of him. You were doing your job, son, I said. You were following orders. But next time, check who owns the pavement before you tell a man to get off it. I walked through the doors. The air conditioning hit me cool and crisp. The lobby was magnificent. Marble floors, gold leaf on the ceiling. It was a temple to excess, and I owned every square inch of it. I could hear the music coming from the ballroom. A string quartet playing something soft and expensive. I could hear the murmur of guests. They were all in there. Monica's family from New York. Jason's friends. The people who thought they were better than me. They were drinking my champagne. They were standing on my floors. They were celebrating a union built on my money. And they had no idea that the landlord had just arrived to collect the rent. I walked toward the ballroom doors. Henderson scurried beside me like a nervous terrier. Sir, he whispered. The police. The ones you requested. They are waiting in the manager's office. Good, I said. Keep them there. Wait for my signal. Signal, sir. When I dropped the microphone, I said, That is the signal. I reached for the handles of the double doors. I could feel the bass of the music vibrating through the wood. It was showtime. I pushed open the double doors to the grand ballroom, and the sound of the string quartet washed over me like a wave of expensive perfume. The room was breathtaking. It was a cavern of gold leaf and crystal, illuminated by chandeliers that cost more than most people earned in a decade. The tables were set with fine china and heavy silverware that gleamed under the lights. The centerpieces were towering arrangements of white orchids and hydrangeas, the very flowers that had been purchased with the money from my wife's stolen locket. I stood there for a moment in the shadows of the entrance, letting my eyes adjust to the brilliance. I looked at the guests. There were hundreds of them. Men in tuxedos, women in designer gowns, people who held their champagne flutes by the stem and laughed with their heads thrown back. They were the elite, the high society, the people my son had been so desperate to impress that he had erased his own father to do it. And there in the center of it all, on a raised platform bathed in a spotlight, was Monica. She looked beautiful. I had to give her that. Her dress was a masterpiece of lace and silk, a garment that cost thousands of dollars. She held a microphone in one hand, her other hand resting theatrically on her chest. She was speaking, and her voice was trembling with a practiced emotion that was so convincing it almost made me sick. "It is such a tragedy," she was saying, her voice echoing softly through the high-quality sound system. "We wanted him to be here so badly. Jason is heartbroken. But you have to understand that his father has been battling some very difficult personal issues for a long time." I stepped out of the shadows. I started walking down the center aisle. The carpet was thick and plush, muffling the sound of my footsteps. "Mental health is such a silent struggle," Monica continued, wiping a non-existent tear from her cheek. "We tried to get him help. We tried to include him. But he isn't himself anymore. He has become unpredictable. Dangerous, even. So for the safety of everyone here, we had to make the difficult decision to let him stay home where he is comfortable." A murmur of sympathy rippled through the crowd. Poor Jason. Poor Monica. Dealing with a crazy old man on their wedding day. I kept walking. I wasn't rushing. I was moving with the steady, unstoppable momentum of a freight train. Jason was standing a few feet away from Monica, his head bowed in a pose of sorrow. He was playing the part of the grieving son perfectly. He was nodding, accepting the silent condolences of the room. Then he looked up. He saw me. His eyes went wide. His jaw dropped. The sorrow vanished, replaced instantly by a look of sheer, unadulterated panic. He took a step forward as if to block me, but then he froze. He saw the way I was walking. He saw the set of my shoulders. He saw the charcoal suit that fit me like armor. He nudged Monica. She stopped talking mid-sentence. She followed his gaze. When she saw me, her face went pale. The microphone dipped in her hand. The silence that fell over the room was instant and total. It started at the front, where the couple stood frozen and rippled backward like a shockwave until every single person in the room turned to see what had stopped the bride. The string quartet trailed off into a dissonant scratch of bows against strings. I didn't stop. I walked past the tables where Monica's parents sat. Her father, Franklin, a man I had paid $12,000 to fly here, was staring at me with his mouth open, a forkful of salmon halfway to his lips. Her mother, Veronica, looked at me with the same expression she would use if a rat had scurried across the table. I walked past the friends Jason had made in college, the ones who drove cars their parents bought them. They looked at me with curiosity. Who is this old guy? Is he security? Is he a crasher? I reached the steps of the stage. Jason made a move. He stepped to the edge of the platform, his hands raised. "Dad," he hissed, his voice barely audible over the hum of the speakers. "Dad, don't. Please, just turn around. We can talk about this." I didn't look at him. I looked past him at Monica. I climbed the steps. 1, 2, 3. I stood on the stage. The spotlight hit me blindingly bright. It was hot. It felt like an interrogation lamp. I walked up to Monica. She backed away from me, clutching the microphone to her chest as if it were a shield. She looked at Jason for help, but Jason was paralyzed. He knew. He knew that any move he made now would only make the explosion worse. "Give me the microphone, Monica," I said. My voice wasn't amplified, but in the dead silence of the room it carried. She shook her head. "No," she whispered. "Get out." "Security. Someone call security." "There is no security, Monica," I said. "Or rather, the security works for me. Now give me the microphone." I reached out. I didn't grab it. I just held my hand open. It was an invitation and a command. She looked at the crowd. She looked at her parents. She looked at the exit. She realized she was trapped. If she fought me for the mic, she would look crazy. If she screamed, she would look hysterical. She was a prisoner of her own desire to appear perfect. Slowly trembling, she handed me the microphone. I took it. It was heavy. It felt good in my hand. It felt like power. I turned to face the room. I looked out at the sea of faces, hundreds of strangers who had been judging me based on a lie. I tapped the microphone. Thump, thump. The sound boomed through the ballroom, shaking the crystals on the chandeliers. "Good afternoon, everyone," I said. My voice was deep and steady. It was the voice of a man who has spent his life shouting over machinery. "I apologize for the interruption. I know you were enjoying the speeches. I know you were enjoying the wine. The vintage is excellent, by the way. I should know. I selected it myself." I saw Henderson, the manager, standing by the kitchen doors. He gave me a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. He had done his job. The doors were barred. No one was coming in to stop this. "My name is Bernie Kowalski," I said. "And contrary to what you have just been told, I am not battling demons, I am not mentally unstable, and I am certainly not dangerous unless you count telling the truth as an act of violence." A gasp went through the room. People shifted in their chairs. This was not part of the script. This was real drama, and they were leaning in. "I am Jason's father." I continued gesturing to my son, who was now standing with his head in his hands, looking like he wanted the floor to swallow him whole. "And the reason I was not here earlier, the reason I was not sitting in the front row where a father should be, is very simple." I paused. I let the silence stretch. I let them wonder. "I was not invited," I said. The murmur grew louder. Shock. Disbelief. "Yesterday evening, I received a text message from my son," I said. It was a very polite text. It explained that his fiancée, Monica, felt that my presence would be a distraction. It explained that because I spent 40 years of my life working with my hands, because I drive a truck and wear flannel shirts, I was too blue-collar for this event. I was told that I would embarrass them in front of you, in front of her sophisticated family. I looked directly at Monica's parents. Franklin put down his fork. Veronica looked like she had swallowed a lemon. "They told me I didn't fit in," I said. "They told me I wasn't good enough to share in their joy." But here is the interesting part. Here is the part that I think you all need to know. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the folded piece of paper, the printout of the wire transfer confirmation. I unfolded it slowly. The paper crinkled in the silence. "Even though I wasn't good enough to attend," I said, holding the paper up to the light, "I was apparently good enough to pay for it." I read from the paper. Wire transfer. Amount $85,000. Recipient, the Grand Plaza. Sender, Bernard Kowalski. I lowered the paper. "I paid for the champagne you are drinking," I said. "I paid for the lobster you are eating. I paid for the band. I paid for the flowers. I paid for the very floor you are standing on." I turned to Jason. He was crying now, silent tears streaming down his face. "You wanted a perfect wedding, Jason," I said. "You wanted to play the prince. But you forgot one thing. A prince doesn't banish the king who built the castle." I turned back to the crowd. "I am a simple man," I said. "I built my life on honesty, on hard work, on loyalty. I thought I had taught my son those same values. I thought I had raised a man. But it seems I raised a parasite." The room was in chaos now. People were whispering, pointing, taking photos. Monica was sobbing loudly, her hands covering her face. "But that is not the worst of it," I said. My voice hardened. The sadness was gone, replaced by the cold steel of the prosecutor. Because when I canceled that check this morning, when I decided that I would not finance my own humiliation, my son and his wife didn't come to me to apologize. They didn't come to ask for forgiveness. They went to my house. They broke into the home I gave them to live in rent-free, and they stole from me. I reached into my breast pocket. I pulled out the yellow pawn slip. "This is a receipt from a pawn shop," I said, holding it up. "It is dated yesterday. They took the paintings my late wife painted. They took her jewelry. They took the watch I gave her when our son was born. They took the last physical pieces of a woman who loved them more than anything in this world. And they sold them. They sold my wife's memory for $1,200 so they could buy more flowers for the head table. I pointed to the massive arrangement of orchids behind me. Those flowers, I roared, my voice cracking with emotion. Those flowers are bought with my wife's soul. The room went dead silent. The horror was palpable. It hung in the air like smoke. Even the waiters had stopped moving. So no, I said, lowering my voice to a whisper that carried to the back of the room. I am not sick. I am not crazy. I am just a father who is finally done paying for the privilege of being disrespected. I looked at Henderson. I nodded. I dropped the microphone. It hit the stage with a deafening thud. Boom. The sound was the period at the end of the sentence. It was the signal. The double doors at the back of the room flew open. 2 uniformed police officers marched in. They didn't look like security guards. They looked like the law. They had handcuffs on their belts and serious expressions on their faces. They walked down the center aisle, the crowd parting for them like the Red Sea. They walked straight toward the stage. I looked at Jason. He looked at the police. Then he looked at me. "Dad," he mouthed. I turned my back on him. I walked down the stairs off the stage. I walked past the police officers without saying a word. I was done talking. The bill had come due, and it was time to collect. The silence in the ballroom was thick enough to choke on. The echo of the dropped microphone was still bouncing off the gilded ceiling when Franklin Monica's father stood up. He pushed his chair back with a screech that sounded like fingernails on a chalkboard. His face was a deep shade of purple, the color of a man who is used to buying his way out of trouble and suddenly realizes his wallet is empty. He pointed a shaking finger at me. "Officer!" He bellowed, his voice trying to find authority it did not possess. "Officer, remove this man immediately. He is trespassing. He is harassing my daughter. He is clearly mentally unstable. This is a private family event, and he is ruining it." I looked at Franklin. I looked at his $3,000 suit, which was straining at the buttons. I looked at the gold watch on his wrist, which probably cost more than my first house. And I felt nothing. No intimidation. No respect. I just felt the cold clarity of a man who has read the credit reports. I stepped off the stage. I didn't walk toward the exit. I walked toward Franklin. The police officers paused, waiting. They knew who had called them. They knew who the victim was. I stopped in front of Franklin's table. I placed my hands on the white tablecloth, leaning in close enough to smell the scotch on his breath. "Sit down, Franklin," I said. He blinked, surprised by the command. "Excuse me." I said, "Sit down," I repeated. "Unless you want me to tell these officers about the shell company in Delaware, or the 3 pending lawsuits for fraud in New York, or the fact that the townhouse in the Hamptons was foreclosed on 6 months ago." Veronica gasped, clutching her pearls. "How dare you?" she whispered. "That is a lie." "Is it, Veronica?" I asked, looking at her. "Is it a lie that you maxed out your last credit card to buy those plane tickets? Is it a lie that you are hoping your daughter marries well so she can bail you out of the hole you dug?" The room went deadly quiet again. The guests who had been whispering about me were now staring at the bride's parents with a new kind of horror. The facade was cracking. The gold paint was peeling off to reveal the rot underneath. "You see," I continued, my voice carrying to the surrounding tables. "I did my homework. When my son told me his fiancée came from money, I looked into it. Because that is what a businessman does. And do you know what I found? I found mirrors and smoke. I found a family that is just as broke as my son is, only with better clothes." Monica let out a strangled cry from the stage. "Stop it!" she screamed. "Stop talking!" I turned back to her. She was trembling so hard the lace on her dress was vibrating. She looked like a trapped animal. "We are not done, Monica," I said. "Not yet." I reached into my pocket again. I pulled out the pawn slip, but I didn't put it away. I flipped it over. Stapled to the back was another receipt, a smaller one, pink thermal paper. "You see," I said, holding it up. "The pawn shop keeps excellent records, and when you sell stolen goods, they ask for ID. And sometimes, if you are buying something else at the same time, they staple the receipts together." I walked back toward the stage. The police officers fell in step behind me, flanking me like a personal guard. Jason was staring at the floor. He couldn't look at me. He couldn't look at Monica. He was shrinking, disappearing into himself. But Monica was staring at the receipt in my hand. Her eyes were wide, fixed on the pink paper. She knew what it was. I climbed the steps one last time. I stood next to her. I looked at her dress. It was a magnificent thing. Layers of white silk, hand-stitched lace, a train that pooled around her feet like a cloud. It was the dress of a princess. "It is a beautiful dress, Monica," I said. She didn't answer. She was breathing in shallow gasps. "It must have cost a fortune," I continued. I looked at the pink receipt. $4,500, I read. A cash deposit. Made yesterday afternoon. At the bridal boutique on Michigan Avenue. The final payment to release the dress from alterations. I looked at the crowd. "My son told me Monica bought this dress months ago," I said. "He told me her parents paid for it." But that was a lie. Her parents couldn't pay for a sandwich. Franklin made a noise in his throat, but he didn't stand up. He stayed in his chair, defeated. "So where did the money come from?" I asked. "Where did a couple with no jobs and frozen bank accounts get $4,500 in cash yesterday afternoon?" I held up the pawn slip. "They got it from the pawn shop," I said. I looked at Monica. I looked at the diamond studs in her ears. I looked at the tennis bracelet on her wrist. "They sold my wife's engagement ring," I said, my voice breaking for the first time. "The ring I proposed with in 1982. The ring she wore for 35 years. They stole it from the safe in the closet. They cracked it open and they took it." A collective gasp went through the room. This was a violation that everyone understood. This wasn't just theft. This was sacrilege. "And they sold it," I roared. "They sold 40 years of marriage. They sold the symbol of my life with Catherine. And do you know what they bought with it?" I pointed a shaking finger at Monica. "They bought a dress. They bought a costume for a liar." Monica looked down at herself. She looked at the white silk as if it had suddenly turned into burning coals. She tried to back away, but she tripped on the train. She stumbled, catching herself on Jason's arm. "Get off me!" Jason hissed, shoving her away. The movement was shocking. The groom rejecting the bride at the altar. Monica stumbled back. "You knew," she screamed at him. "You drove the car. You waited outside. Don't act like you didn't know." "I didn't know you sold the ring," Jason shouted back, his face red and twisted. "You told me it was just the old silver. You told me the ring was safe." "You are a liar," she shrieked. "You needed the money just as much as I did." "Enough," I said. The word cut through their argument like a knife. I turned to the police officers. "Officers," I said, "I am Bernard Kowalski. I am the owner of the property at Oak Street, and I am the owner of the items listed on this pawn ticket. These two people broke into my home. They removed property valued in excess of $50,000, and they sold it to a fence downtown." I handed the receipts to the older officer, a sergeant with gray hair and a face that had seen too much of the ugly side of human nature. He looked at the papers. He looked at the dates. He looked at the names. "Jason Kowalski and Monica Davenport," he read aloud. "Yes," I said. "That is them. I want to press charges. Full extent of the law." The sergeant nodded. He stepped forward. He reached for his belt. "Jason Kowalski, Monica Davenport, he said, his voice loud and official. You are under arrest for grand larceny, burglary, and trafficking in stolen property. The sound of the handcuffs coming out was a sharp metallic ratchet. Click. Click, Jason's knees gave out. He collapsed onto the stage, sobbing. Dad, no. Dad, please. Not here, not in front of everyone. Stand up, son, the officer said, grabbing Jason by the arm and hauling him to his feet. Put your hands behind your back. Jason looked at me. His eyes were pleading. Dad, stop this. I will pay you back. I will work. I will do anything. Just tell them to stop. I looked at him. I looked at the son I had carried on my shoulders, the son I had taught to ride a bike, the son I had protected from every hard edge of the world, and I realized that protecting him was the worst thing I had ever done. You can't pay me back, Jason, I said softly. The ring is gone. The paintings are gone. And the trust is gone. You are on your own now. The officer spun him around. He snapped the cuffs onto Jason's wrists. The sound was final. It was the sound of a life breaking into two pieces, before and after. Monica was fighting. She was trying to run, but the train of her dress was heavy. The second officer caught her. She screamed, kicking and scratching. My dress, she wailed. You are ruining my dress. It isn't your dress, the officer said, spinning her around. It is evidence. He cuffed her. She stood there, chest heaving, mascara running down her face, looking at her parents in the front row. Daddy, help me, she cried. Do something. Franklin looked at her. Then he looked at me. Then he looked at the police. He picked up his napkin and dabbed at his mouth. He didn't stand up. He didn't say a word. He knew that if he drew attention to himself, the next pair of handcuffs might be for him. The officers marched them across the stage. They led them down the stairs. The walk of shame was excruciatingly long. The guests parted in silence, watching the bride and groom being dragged away, not to a honeymoon suite, but to a squad car. The white dress swept the floor, collecting dust, a symbol of purity dragged through the mud of their own making. I stood on the stage alone. The room was silent. No one moved. No one spoke. They were waiting for me to say something else, to apologize, to explain, to break the tension. But I had nothing left to say. I looked at Henderson. He was pale, but he was standing tall. He knew who signed the checks. Clear the room, Henderson, I said. The party is over. Henderson nodded. He signaled to the staff. I walked down the stairs. I didn't look at the empty space where my son had stood. I didn't look at the weeping mother of the bride. I walked down the center aisle. My footsteps were heavy. I felt old. I felt tired. But I also felt light. The weight of the secret. The weight of the disappointment. It was all gone. I walked through the double doors into the lobby. I walked out the front entrance. The police cars were there. Lights flashing blue and red against the white limestone. They were putting Jason into the back of one car and Monica into another. I didn't stop to watch. I walked to my truck. It was still parked on the red carpet, defiant and ugly and real. I climbed in. I started the engine. I put it in gear and drove away. I didn't look in the rearview mirror. I didn't need to. I knew what was behind me. A ruin. A disaster. But ahead of me, the road was open. And for the first time in a long time, it belonged to me. The fluorescent lights of the precinct interview room hummed with a sound that drilled straight into the base of my skull. It was a stark contrast to the string quartet and the crystal chandeliers of an hour ago. Here there was no champagne. There were no flowers. There was only gray cinder block walls, a steel table bolted to the floor, and the smell of industrial cleaner trying to mask the scent of sweat and fear. I sat on a metal chair, my back straight, my hands folded on the table. I watched the door. I waited. When the guard finally brought Jason in, I almost didn't recognize him. The tuxedo that had looked so sharp on the stage was now a wrinkled mess, the collar unbuttoned, the tie missing. His face was blotchy and red, his eyes swollen shut from crying. He wasn't walking like a man. He was shuffling his shoulders, hunched as if he were trying to make himself small enough to disappear. He sat down opposite me. The guard shackled his wrist to the table loop. The sound of the metal clinking was loud in the small room. Jason looked up. When he saw me, his face crumpled. He looked like he was 5 years old again, and had just scraped his knee on the sidewalk. "Dad," he choked out. "Oh, God. Dad, thank you for coming. Please get me out of here. It is a nightmare. There is a guy in the holding cell who keeps screaming. I can't stay here. I can't." I didn't say anything. I just looked at him. I looked for the arrogance he had shown me in my driveway this morning. I looked for the defiance he had shown when he changed the locks on my house. It was all gone. It had evaporated the moment the handcuffs clicked shut. "Dad," Jason said, leaning forward as far as the chain would allow. "You have to post bail. The lawyer said it will be set in the morning. Just pay it. Please. I will pay you back. I swear. I will get a job. I will do whatever you want. Just get me out." I leaned back in my chair. The metal was cold against my spine. "I am not here to bail you out." "Jason," I said. He froze. His mouth hung open. "What?" "I am here to say goodbye," I said. "Goodbye," he stammered. "Dad, what are you talking about? You can't leave me here." "I can," I said. "And I am going to, but it wasn't my fault," he blurted out, the words tumbling over each other in a rush of panic. "It was Monica. You know how she is, Dad. She is obsessed with image. She pressured me. She said we needed the money for the wedding. She said you wouldn't notice the jewelry. She said the paintings were just old junk. I tried to stop her, Dad. I swear. I told her it was wrong. But she wouldn't listen. She made me do it. I listened to him throwing his wife under the bus. The woman he had promised to love and cherish not 2 hours ago was now just a scapegoat. He was willing to sacrifice her to save his own skin, just like he had been willing to sacrifice me to save his social standing. It was pathetic. It was the most cowardly thing I had ever seen. "Stop," I said. He stopped, breathing heavily. "Do you hear yourself?" I asked. "You are a grown man, Jason. You are 28 years old, and you are sitting here telling me that a girl made you steal from your own father. You are telling me that you have no spine, no will, and no honor." I loved her," he whispered weakly. "You didn't love her," I said. "You loved the idea of her. You loved that she made you feel important. And you loved my money because it allowed you to buy her attention. But love isn't theft, Jason. And marriage isn't a conspiracy to commit larceny." "Dad, please," he sobbed, burying his face in his hands. "I am sorry. I am so sorry. I messed up. I know I messed up. But prison. Dad, I can't go to prison. I am not built for this." I looked at him. He was right. He wasn't built for it. He was soft. He was doughy. He had never had to fight for anything in his life because I had fought all his battles for him. I had paved the road so smooth, he never learned how to walk on gravel. And that was my fault. That was the one crime I was guilty of. "That is exactly why you need to stay here," I said. He looked up, tears dripping off his chin. "Why do you hate me?" he whispered. "I don't hate you," I said. "I love you. That is the tragedy of this. I love you enough to let you fall." I stood up. The chair scraped against the concrete floor. "For 28 years I protected you," I said. looking down at him. I shielded you from consequences. I paid your debts. I fixed your mistakes. And look what it created. It created a thief. It created a liar. It created a man who would sell his mother's memory for a centerpiece. Dad, no. I am doing you a favor, Jason, I said. I am giving you the one thing I never gave you before. Reality. There is no safety net anymore. There is no checkbook coming to save the day. There is just you and the law. But Monica, he wailed. What about Monica? Monica is in the cell block down the hall, I said. And if she is smart, she is probably blaming you right now, just like you blamed her. You deserve each other. I turned toward the door. Dad! Wait! Jason screamed, pulling at the chain. Dad, don't walk away, please. I am scared. I stopped with my hand on the doorknob. I looked back at him one last time. You should be scared, I said. Growing up is terrifying, but it is the only way you are going to survive. I knocked on the heavy steel door. The guard opened it from the outside. Dad! Jason shouted, his voice cracking into a sob. Dad, come back! I walked out into the hallway. The door slammed shut behind me, cutting off his voice with a heavy metallic thud. I stood there for a moment, listening to the silence. It was heavy, it was painful. It felt like I had just cut off my own arm. But it also felt right. I walked down the hallway past the booking desk, past the officers drinking coffee. I walked out into the night air. The city was alive with lights and sirens. The world was still turning. I walked to my truck. I got in. I sat there for a long time, staring at the steering wheel. I had lost a son today. But maybe, just maybe, in a few years, when he walked out of those gates, a man would walk out in his place. And if that happened, it would be worth every cent of the $85,000 I had saved. I started the engine. I put the truck in gear. I drove away from the precinct, leaving my boy behind, to learn the hardest lesson of his life. School was in session. It took 30 days to scrub the stain of betrayal from my life. 30 days of lawyers' meetings, signatures, and silence. The silence was the hardest part at first. The phone didn't ring. There were no texts asking for money, no frantic calls about broken water heaters or maxed-out credit cards. For a week, I checked the screen every hour out of habit. But by the second week, I stopped checking. By the third week, I realized that the silence wasn't emptiness. It was peace. I went back to the pawn shop the Monday after the wedding. The owner, a guy named Sal, looked at me with a mix of respect and fear when I walked in. He had seen the news. Everyone had seen the news. I slapped the ticket on the counter along with a stack of hundreds. I didn't negotiate. I didn't argue about the interest. I just wanted my life back. Sal brought the items out from the safe. Catherine's pearls, the gold watch, and the paintings. I unwrapped the canvas of the lake house. I ran my thumb over the dried oil paint, feeling the texture of the brush strokes my wife had made 20 years ago. They were safe. They were home. But I didn't take them back to my house. My house was too quiet, and I was done living in a museum of memories. I took the jewelry to a high-end auction house, and I took the paintings to a gallery that specialized in local artists. I didn't want the money. I had enough money. I wanted the energy to shift. I sold the house on Oak Street 3 days later. It went to a young couple, a mechanic and a nurse, who walked through the front door and looked at the place like it was a palace. They didn't ask for upgrades. They didn't complain about the fixtures. They just held hands and talked about where they would put the crib. I sold it to them for 10% under market value just because I liked the calluses on the husband's hands. When the check for the house cleared and the auction house wired the funds for the jewelry, I took every single cent and I opened a new account. The Catherine Kowalski Scholarship Fund. It was for kids who wanted to go to trade school, for kids who wanted to learn how to weld, how to plumb, how to build things that lasted. It was the best investment I had ever made. Now I sat in seat 1A of a Boeing 777. The leather was soft, much softer than the seats in my truck. The air smelled of conditioned oxygen and expensive cologne. Mr. Kowalski, a flight attendant, asked, leaning over with a bottle wrapped in a white napkin. "Would you like a glass of champagne before takeoff?" I looked at the bottle. Dom Perignon, the same stuff that had been going flat on the counter of the house my son had destroyed. I smiled. "Yes," I said. "I would love one." She poured the golden liquid into a crystal flute. The bubbles danced, rising to the surface in a frantic race to be free. I took the glass. It felt light in my hand. I looked out the window. The tarmac was busy with baggage carts and fuel trucks, men in neon vests doing the hard work that made the world move. Beyond the airport, the city of Chicago sprawled out, a grid of gray and green. Somewhere down there, in a county facility, my son was waiting for a plea hearing. He was learning how to make his own bed. He was learning that actions have mass and velocity. I didn't feel angry anymore. The rage that had fueled me on the day of the wedding had burned itself out, leaving behind a clean slate. I had done my job. I had raised him. I had provided for him. And when he went astray, I had corrected him. The rest was up to him. The plane began to push back from the gate. The engines whined, spinning up to a roar that vibrated through the floorboards. I took a sip of the champagne. It was cold and crisp. It tasted like victory. Not the victory of beating someone else, but the victory of reclaiming yourself. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I looked at it one last time. There were no missed calls, no unread messages. I held the power button. The screen went black. I put the phone in my bag and zipped it shut. I wouldn't be needing it for a while. I was going to Italy. Catherine had always wanted to go to the Amalfi Coast. She wanted to paint the light on the water. We never went because I was always too busy working. Too busy building an empire for a son who didn't want it. Well, I was going now. I was going to eat pasta and drink wine and look at the ocean. I was going to sleep in until noon if I wanted to. I was going to spend my money on memories I could actually keep. The plane taxied to the runway. The pilot came over the intercom announcing our flight time to Rome. I leaned my head back against the headrest. I closed my eyes. For 66 years, I had been Bernie the contractor, Bernie the husband, Bernie the father, Bernie the bank account. Today, I was just Bernie. The engines roared to full power. The force pushed me back into the seat. We gathered speed faster and faster until the bumps of the runway smoothed out and the ground fell away. I opened my eyes and looked out the window. The city was gone, hidden beneath a layer of white clouds. The sun was shining on top of them, brilliant and blinding. I raised my glass to the empty seat beside me. "Here is to you, Catherine," I whispered. "And here is to me." I took a drink. The champagne bubbled in my throat. I was flying. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't carrying anyone else's weight. I was just flying. We spend our lives trying to give our children the things we never had. But in the process, we often forget to give them what they actually need: character. I thought loving my son meant shielding him from the rain, but I only succeeded in raising a man who couldn't handle a storm. True wealth isn't the balance in your bank account or the label on your suit. It is the ability to look in the mirror and respect the person staring back. Never allow anyone, not even your own blood, to treat you like a resource instead of a person. Dignity is the only currency that matters, and sometimes you have to be willing to lose everything else just to keep it. If you believe I did the right thing by letting them face the consequences, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of justice served cold. Let me know in the comments. Would you have bailed your son out, or would you have walked away just like I did?
갑자기 뛰거든요?